You've finally done it. After years of adding movies and shows to your queues, you've officially run out of things to watch on Netflix. You've also exhausted your entire backlog of books, and you've even run out of cereal boxes to read. So you're left roaming the streets in search of entertainment. That's when you see a worn-looking flyer stapled to a nearby telephone pole. It's an ad for a local community theater production of a play you've never heard of. A play called The Hanged King's Tragedy. Normally, you wouldn't think of yourself as much of a theater person, but something about the art on the poster grabs you. There's a strange figure on the poster, its face shrouded, its body wrapped in a web of chains. Your curiosity gets the better of you, and you check the performance date. To your pleasant surprise, opening night is a week from now, and you don't have anything planned. You've made up your mind. You're going to attend a live performance of The Hanged King's Tragedy. It's going to be the first live play you've ever seen, and little do you know, it may also be the last. Because The Hanged King's Tragedy isn't just any old play. It's a powerful and deadly mimetic hazard that may be one of the gateways to an even more dangerous being. It's known to the SCP Foundation as SCP-701, so take your seats. Be sure to read your programs thoroughly and prepare for the dark and terrifying tale of the Hanged King's Tragedy and the wave of death and destruction it causes in its theatrical wake. But how could you know any of this? While you head home to make dinner, looking forward to seeing the new play next week, the local thespians are hard at work performing dress rehearsals. The director, one Marcus Fitch, happened upon a copy of the play while looking for Carolinian theater that's a little more family-friendly than some of the Shakespearean classics. When he'd first discovered The Hanged King's Tragedy on a theatrical forum, it was described as being similar to Shakespeare's Hamlet and Titus Andronicus, but the violence was largely offstage and implied, with a lot of the play's nastier elements glossed over, perfect for audience of all ages. Given the fact that performances of The Hanged King's Tragedy tend to be mass casualty events, for reasons you'll soon see, the Foundation does everything they can to control the spread of the play's script. All copies are kept in a triple-locked vault in a secure Foundation archive, which currently includes 2 copies of the original publication that are dated to the year 1640, 27 copies of the 1965 trade paperback edition, 10 copies of a 1971 hardcover printing, 21 floppy diskettes containing the play's script, and 1 SVHS videocassette tape containing a live taping of one particularly infamous incident. However, this seemingly does little to prevent new performances of The Hanged King's Tragedy from occurring. The text of the play continually pops up online, often under different or misspelled titles, preventing Foundation web crawlers from keeping track of them all. Nevertheless, the Foundation does everything in its power to detect and stop performances before they can go ahead. The danger of putting on or even viewing a performance of The Hanged King's Tragedy cannot be overstated. It's believed that, in the almost 300 years since its original publication, it's claimed 10,000 lives through performances at the very least. And if you're in attendance, dying quickly is one of the better outcomes. The origins of this mimetic virus are just as mysterious as the power that seems to drive its effects. The play never had a declared author, and the publisher, one William Cook, disappeared from all historical records after the play's publications. Performances have been varied over the 300 years the play has been active. It's been spotted everywhere, from British university drama troupes to American high school plays. In what could have been an even more disastrous tragedy, a television adaptation of the play was almost broadcast by the BBC before the Foundation stepped in and put a stop to it. While its containment classification is currently Euclid, scientists who have studied the play have campaigned strongly to upgrade The Hanged King's Tragedy to Keter class, on account of its unpredictability and tendency to manifest across the globe, with incidences appearing decades apart. While members of the O5 Council are skeptical, some researchers even believe that given a wide enough exposure, The Hanged King's Tragedy could cause a dreaded XK class end-of-the-world scenario. It is that dangerous. At this point, you're probably wondering, what exactly is The Hanged King's Tragedy? What's the play even about? As the name suggests, the play is a tragedy and takes place over 5 acts during the Carolinian era, portraying the drama of the royal court much like a number of plays from that time did. It takes place in the city of Circus, the capital of the mysterious fictional kingdom of Trinculo. The focal point of the play is the conflict between Gonzalo, the illegitimate king of Trinculo, and Antonio, the true heir to the throne. Before the start of the play, the previous king of Trinculo, King Sforza, had been betrayed and murdered by Gonzalo. Gonzalo led Sforza into the woods, where he and his men subdued the king and hanged him from a nearby tree like a common criminal. Hence the Hanged King's tragedy. However, Gonzalo is trying to keep his part in the king's murder a secret to keep the throne for himself, but his guilt-stricken wife Isabella threatens to spill the secret of Sforza's murder. While Antonio tries to uncover the truth of what happened in the woods, Gonzalo, in true Shakespearean villain style, plots further murders of his co-conspirators and loose ends to keep his dark secrets safe. This is where the play gets a little gruesome. One enemy, Gonzalo had killed and cooked into a stew. He then intends to use this stew to murder his entire court with the help of an effective and undetectable poison he was given by the mysterious ambassador of Alagadda. Though you'll be pleased to know that this tragedy has somewhat of a happy ending. In the end, Gonzalo is exposed and Antonio claims his rightful place as king of Trinculo. Unlike his predecessor, Antonio decides to show mercy, and Gonzalo is exiled to a monastery for life rather than being executed for his murderous ways. The heroes are rewarded, the villains are punished, and all the deserving parties live happily ever after. At face value, nothing seems off about the play. If you're familiar with other works of the era, you might even find yourself getting bored while reading it. How can something this normal be the cursed play that claims so many thousands of lives? But this play's unassuming nature only serves to make it more dangerous. It doesn't appear that the mimetic hazard is caused by simply reading the play. Like all good theater, it only truly comes to life on stage. And your local production of the Hanged King's tragedy is no exception. As your community's amateur actors study and rehearse the play, making sure to commit every scene, every line, every single word to memory, they don't notice the little things that, to an outsider, might seem a little off. Occasionally during group dress rehearsals, actors will veer from the script. And we're not talking about flubbed lines or simple improvisation. No. Actors will at times seem like they're reading from a completely different script, and their fellow performers will respond in kind. The play lulls you into a false sense of security. Stagehands, crew members, even the director all believe they're performing the play exactly as it was originally written. Okay, so that's not so bad. A play that changes itself. But things are going to get worse from this point. Much, much worse. But hey, why let a deadly anomaly ruin your evening plans? You've been looking forward to seeing this play all week, and you couldn't seem to get that figure from the poster out of your mind. You have no idea that this entity is wanted by the SCP Foundation, and that its designation is SCP-701-1. All you want is an unforgettable theater experience, and you will certainly get one. It's a packed house. Not an empty seat in sight. The house lights dim and the curtain opens. Act 1 is quite normal, with all the backstabbing and royal court intrigue you'd expect. You actually feel yourself getting a little bored. A big yawn escapes your mouth. You're thinking that maybe this was a big mistake, and you might sneak out between acts, when just then, you see it. In the final scene of Act 1, you see the shrouded figure lingering in the background against the curtains. He seems so still, he's almost like a shadow. But as each act seems to run into the next, he becomes more prominent. The rest of the cast never acknowledges him as they deliver dramatic monologues, but he's always there. Finally, the play reached Act 5, the grand banquet scene where it all comes to head. Gonzalo is preparing to poison his dinner guest with his cannibal stew, while Antonio and his allies plot to reveal his terrible crimes and dethrone him. You find yourself so gripped by the drama of it all, you almost didn't notice that the shrouded figure of SCP-701-1 was standing right among the actors now. While unbeknownst to you, the actors have been deviating from the scripted story this whole time. Things are about to really take a turn for the horrific. SCP-701-1, who is now known to the other performers as the Hanged King, produces a blade from thin air and passes it to the actor playing Gonzalo's wife. The actors on stage suddenly become entranced. They attack and restrain Gonzalo, and a noose drops down from somewhere above the stage. The actors proceed to ritualistically hang Gonzalo before the actor playing his wife stabs him to death, all while chanting, "Blood for the Hanged King." You should be horrified, but you're not. You don't even feel like yourself anymore, and you're loving everything that's happening. On stage, a series of other nooses fall from above. Each actor grabs their own noose and the cast repeats "Blood for the Hanged King" before sacrificing their lives to the shroud-wearing monster. If the carnage stopped there, it would be bad enough. But this play doesn't just drive its players to acts of violent insanity, it pulls in the audience too. Before you know it, you're pulled into a vicious brawl with your fellow theatergoers. There's biting, clawing, punching, people hitting each other with chairs like it's a wrestling cage match. It's such a frenzy of random senseless violence that the building can't contain it anymore. You and anyone else who isn't dead already spilled out onto the streets and start attacking everyone you can get your hands on. It's transformed from a pleasant night out at the theater into a full-blown riot. Even the police sent in to control the situation are overwhelmed. It isn't until the SCP Foundation sends a number of mobile task forces trained in advanced crowd control that the situation finally begins to de-escalate. But you don't care. Even when large men in Foundation tactical gear are holding your arms, you still try to bite and kick. The effects of the play normally wear off after around 24 hours, but until then the infected, including you, are just rage-fueled monsters. In the end, it takes 4 adult men to properly restrain you. You'll feel the bruises from their nightsticks tomorrow, but now all you feel is hate and violence, and a single-minded devotion to something out there that you couldn't possibly comprehend. And the whole time you're screaming one thing over and over again: "Blood for the Hanged King." The Tower of London. One of the most famous towers out there, next to the Sears Tower and the Leaning Tower of Pisa. A place where tourists go to gawk at history, uncomfortably large and bold ravens, and ask the timeless question, why are the guards called beefeaters? But enough jokes. This iconic site is no laughing matter. The tower is best known for its blood-soaked history as the site of hundreds of imprisonments and executions over the years, as well as a fair share of murders. 3 queens, Anne Boleyn, Jane Grey, and Catherine Howard lost their heads there. Edward V and Richard, Duke of York, were found murdered there, still only children when they died. King Henry VI was killed during his prayers in his private chapel. The list goes on, and the blood continues to flow. It is no surprise that many consider the Tower of London to be among the most haunted places in the world. Few locals have seen such an intense concentration of violent, tragic death and misery. There are reports of Queen Anne Boleyn wandering the halls with her severed head tucked under her arm, the little murdered princes frolicking through the corridors in the dead of night, and the Countess of Salisbury reenacting her horrific execution, in which she was hacked to death as she fled. If you're at all enthused in British royal history, you may know about all these people and their grisly ends already. But what you may not know about is a formerly imprisoned man known as the Wizard Earl. Henry Percy, 9th Earl of Northumberland, also known as Wizard Earl due to his involvement in the occult, was imprisoned in the Tower of London in the late 1590s. Though he was a prisoner, he lived a relatively comfortable life and was allowed to continue his research and build a small library of books and other academic materials in his room. He died in November of 1632, and the secrets of his research died with him. That is, until Martin Tower was being renovated hundreds of years later. During the process of renovations to the Martin Tower, a hidden chamber was discovered beneath the tower's structure. It did not appear on any official blueprints of the building. The chamber contained scattered notes and papers and a sturdy iron door. Despite several attempts, the door could not be opened by any ordinary means. Further investigation of the papers found in the chamber revealed that they were research notes penned by Henry Percy, who is thought to have created the chamber and the door within it. The notes were unusual and ominous, hinting at a sense of otherworldly danger. A particularly unsettling note was an unsent letter from Henry Percy to famed playwright Christopher Marlowe. In the letter, Percy apologizes to Marlowe for refusing to accept his warning about building the Janus Gate, a significant term as Janus is the Roman deity that represents buildings, transitions, and passageways. The letter also references a cursed play, most likely the Hanged King's Tragedy, or SCP-701, which Percy begs Marlowe to destroy. He ends the letter by saying that he has sealed the gate, permitting only the enlightened to enter it so that they might perhaps see what Percy could not. The letter concludes, "Damn that metropolis of blood, that terrible realm and its ancient countless crimes. Consign thy play to the fire, deny thy vile patron, and anoint thee from this madness. We would fain welcome thee back into the night." More troubling, perhaps, than the contents of the letter itself is the date it was to be sent, May 30th, 1593, the day before Marlowe was murdered. Suspecting the presence of an anomalous artifact the Janus Gate referenced in Percy's notes and letters, the Crown hurriedly contacted the SCP Foundation and requested they perform a thorough investigation. What they found was unlike anything the Foundation has ever encountered, before or since. Henry Percy was speaking truthfully in his letter. He did seal off the door in his secret chamber. The only way to open it is to complete a series of alchemical instructions, similar to those used in the creation of a philosopher's stone. A resident alchemy expert at the Foundation assisted in finding the solution, and for better or for worse, the Janus Gate was unlocked for observation. Beyond the gate lies a city known as SCP-2264-B. The city is extra-dimensional, matching no known location on Earth or anywhere else. Upon entering the city, the smell of dried flowers and old books greets you. You glance up at the sky to find it an eerie yellow, spotted with infinite glittering black stars. If you look down at yourself, you will find that your clothes have disappeared, replaced with attire that would not be out of place at a masquerade ball. Your face is adorned with a Venetian mask that you cannot remove, no matter how hard you try, until you have left this strange world and passed back through the gate. If you pause to take in the sights of the city around you, you will find buildings carved from one single undetermined material, all in black, white, yellow, or red. These are the only colors present in the city. In the distance, a viscous black ocean laps at the shore on all sides. Though the ominous black liquid in said ocean is anything but water, the city, though it has been proven to exist in a corporeal state, has the quality of a lucid dream. Operatives inside of it report difficulty concentrating, citing a feeling of hypnagogic malaise, inability to control their impulses, and trouble describing what they saw and did inside of the city once they have returned to the regular world. The dimension seems to run on dream logic, best described in the movie Inception. Not everything makes sense, and transitions between place and time seem muddy, to say the least. After several expeditions that failed to return conclusive, coherent observations about the city's nature, another exploration was planned. Chosen for his experience with altered states, mainly lucid dreaming and hallucinogenic drugs, Dr. Calixto Neves was selected to lead this exploration. Upon entering SCP-2264-B for his first exploration, most of Dr. Neves' colleagues split off from him to join in the decadent celebrations in the palace. He resisted this temptation, though of course he considered it for a moment, and continued on with his investigation of the city. He made several significant discoveries over the course of this first expedition, which informed the Foundation's perspective on the city going forward. First, he realized that the city somehow universally translates language. No matter what a person's native tongue is, they will hear the inhabitants of the city speaking in it. Some of Dr. Neves' colleagues heard the citizens speaking English, while he heard them speaking in his native Spanish. It is unclear how this instantaneous translation is accomplished. Second, he learned the name of the city, Alagadda, a city-state bordering something referred to only as the Neverment. To provide a little context and clarification, the city of Alagadda is a nexus point for a whole multiverse of hedonists. Countless entities from every conceivable dimension turn up here to sample its legendary pleasures. Think of it almost like a multidimensional Cancun during spring break. He was given this information by a foreign scholar known as the Wandsman of Kulmanas, a robed creature in a bird-like mask. The Wandsman was also able to provide some insight into the political power structure of Alagadda, providing Dr. Nevaez with his third piece of critical new information. The city is overseen by 4 masked lords: the Black Lord, wearer of the Anguished Mask; the White Lord, wearer of the Diligent Mask; the Yellow Lord, wearer of the Odious Mask; and the Red Lord, wearer of the Mirthful Mask. These powerful entities act as advisors to the city's mighty king, who many of the travelers in the city sought a favor from. The Wandsman warned about each of these lords, stating that in spite of their different names, they are all equally dangerous. They also warned against interacting with the ambassador of Alagadda. After this illuminating conversation, Dr. Nevaez gathered the rest of his colleagues and returned to the real world. On his second expedition into Alagadda, Dr. Nevaez immediately sought out the Wandsman of Kulmanas. The Wandsman expressed concern for Dr. Nevaez and his team, warning them, "The ambassador of Alagadda will soon return from Adiantum, and only the mad shall remain. I suggest you leave post-haste, for I intend the same." When pressed on the subject of Aditium, the Wandsman explained that it is a terrible city filled with equally terrible people. It is said that the Grand Karsis of Adiantum serves the designs of an elder being, a horror thought to rival even the Hanged King of Alagadda. Before Dr. Nevaez could gather any more answers, the Wandsman stopped, becoming clearly frightened, and said, "I sense the ambassador of Alagadda has returned. I take my leave of this place, and I suggest you do the same. Flee, do not delay." The Wandsman promptly exited through the nearest door. Following Dr. Nevaez's expeditions, the Foundation appointed a task force of agents trained in hand-to-hand combat and counter-occult strategies to go back into Alagadda. The task force, nicknamed the Abyss Gazers, was to seek out the king and ambassador of Alagadda and determine the level of threat they might pose to humanity. 12 agents were sent in, and only one, Agent Alexander Papadopoulos, came back alive. The other 11 are presumed dead or lost forever. Agent Papadopoulos was found unconscious and in critical condition outside of the entrance to Alagadda. A physical exam was conducted, revealing broken bones throughout his entire body, as well as severe internal bleeding. He was in the hospital for 3 weeks before the Foundation determined him healthy enough for an interview. The interview was conducted by Dr. Laxmi Narang and allowed the Foundation to get a sense of what Agent Papadopoulos witnessed inside the city and what happened to the other 11 team members. The team managed to locate the palace, struggling with the dreamlike effect of the city on the mind and the lack of ability to determine how much time had passed while they were there. As the group descended deeper into the palace, it became more convoluted and labyrinthine. They spent most of their time descending a staircase, traveling deeper and deeper. When they reached the bottom of the staircase, suddenly they were outside of the palace again, as if they never went inside. Except everything was a little bit different, wrong somehow. The whole world looked dark and drained of color, bathed in hazy gray light. There were no people to be seen, and the buildings looked run down and abandoned. They walked back into the palace from this strange new location and began to hear whispering, not just in their ears, but in their very minds. The ambassador of Alagadda had found them. It appeared before them, a tall, thin, dark figure, with no face, no mouth, no eyes. Somehow it spoke, in a language none of the team could understand, and it laughed. As it watched, unable to control themselves, the team began to tear each other apart. Flesh ripped, organs collapsed, bones shattered, and none of them could stop themselves, until Agent Papadopoulos was the only one left alive. He was not left alive by mistake. The ambassador left him living in order to pass on the message of its existence. It dragged his limp body into the chambers of the king and forced him to look upon its twisted form. His exact terrifying words of the account paint a gruesome picture. Eventually, we stopped, and it lifted me into the air, held me up before the throne. There I saw the king. It was anchored in place, hollowed bonds around its corpse-like hands and throat, its face hidden beneath a veil. Impish creatures crawled all over it, caressing its twitching body as if intending comfort, while others pulled the tethers even tighter. The king trembled and quivered, and I saw the pale tendrils slither in and out of its tattered robes. I looked on as the veil was lifted. At this point in his interview, the agent became inconsolable. He begged to be killed, a request which was denied. Before the interview ended, the agent said, "A god-shaped hole, the barren desolation of a fallen and failed creation. You see the light of long-dead stars. Your existence is nothing but an echo of a dying god's screams. The unseen converges, surrounds you, and tightens like a noose." After the interview, Agent Papadopoulos refused food and water and repeatedly requested to be terminated. This request was denied every time, and he was given a feeding tube for nutrients. After the revelations in the Papadopoulos interview, the Foundation suspended all research expeditions into Alagadda. It is difficult to hide SCP-2264 from the public, due to the public nature of the building the gateway is located in. Because the Tower of London cannot be shut off to the public, the Foundation has focused on hiding the gateway from anyone who might accidentally stumble upon it. The government of the United Kingdom and the Foundation work together to build a secret passage to SCP-2264, accessible only to authorized personnel. The original entrance has been walled off. Meanwhile, beyond the gate, Alagadda continues in its strange, twisted ways. We do not know what the ambassador wants, or the nature of the other beings lurking within the city walls, but we can only hope that they never find their way through the gate to us. A lot of us have fond memories of Halloween, dressing up in spooky costumes, wandering around the neighborhood with friends while trick-or-treating, getting home with literal buckets full of candy, and then eating so many sugary treats that you feel sick. Halloween is a beloved holiday, especially throughout many parts of the United States. And if you were lucky enough to grow up in a town that really went all out when the last night of October rolled around, then you may have even had a local Halloween-themed fairground to visit on the creepiest night of the year. Scary rides, mazes, and jack-o'-lanterns as far as the eye can see. But with all that said, if you lived in a certain town in the Midwest, then maybe the county fair is a little more frightening than the spirit of the Halloween season usually encourages. Settle in for a story of scares, a tale of terror, and a fable of frights. This is SCP-097, also known as Old Fairgrounds. Cordoned off by the SCP Foundation using huge concrete walls is 10 acres of rural land in an undisclosed area of the Midwestern United States. The place itself is completely abandoned, left silent and alone as everything contained within those walls slowly falls into disrepair. This is all that remains of the local county fair, held in the year 1969. And right in the middle of it all, a pickup truck, crushed and wrecked beyond all use. But this truck didn't crash. Oh no, this was no tragic roadside accident. The thing that crushed it happened to be a gigantic pumpkin. Now, we aren't just talking about a local vegetable growing competition winner here. When we say this is a big pumpkin, we are talking huge. The colossal squash has been recorded to measure well over 7 meters in height, with a diameter just over 8 meters at the widest point. According to estimates, this pumpkin, known as SCP-097-1, weighs an enormous 15,000 kilograms, or 33,070 pounds. To give you a frame of reference, that's about 4 times the average weight of a hippopotamus. The pumpkin even manages to keep a perfectly spherical shape, staying plump and round rather than spreading out under its own weight as you might expect a plant of such size would. Okay, a pickup truck crushed by a giant pumpkin, You might be wondering, surely that can't be all there is. Well, don't you worry. We're just getting started with this creep show. The rest of the surrounding area of SCP-097 is abundant in overgrown pumpkins. None that quite reach the enviable size of SCP-097-1, but plenty of all different subspecies and types. On average, these smaller pumpkins weigh around 250 kilograms, or 550 pounds. Along with various other crops that have grown within the area of SCP-097, the pumpkins seem to have formed some kind of maze. No pun intended. Get it? Maze? Like corn? These jokes are wasted on you. Spooky mazes are no strange inclusion at rural Halloween fairs like this one. Getting lost in the middle of the night surrounded by rows of corn taller than a human being is all part of the fun. Makes a person feel like they're right in the middle of a classic 80s slasher movie, where the killer could be creeping up behind them any second. The naturally formed labyrinth found within SCP-097 has spread all throughout what is left of the 1969 county fairgrounds, with the walls of crops reaching over 1.5 meters tall, depending on the year. So, is that all? A maze of crops with one giant pumpkin at its center? Oh, that's far from all there is to SCP-097. During the time between April and November of every year, a number of bizarre and anomalous phenomenon takes place within this abandoned county fairground, ranging from strange happenings that defy explanation to things that are downright dangerous. Since they first came into contact with SCP-097, the Foundation have lost 8 agents to this phenomenon that occur within that area, with another 17 being severely maimed. While the exact time of these events seems to vary, the SCP Foundation keeps an extensive record of phenomena that occur within SCP-097. Now, sometimes these will be as harmless and annoying as the sound of drums playing throughout the day for almost 24 hours without stopping. Then there's the sightings of entities moving through the maze only to disappear after a few short seconds. Security footage the Foundation agents have gathered of these entities depict them as what can only be described as bedsheet ghosts, the kind you might see and immediately think of as a last-minute, low-budget Halloween costume. On one particular occasion, singing was heard in the maze, coming from an unidentified source. When analyzed, recordings made by the Foundation revealed that there were up to 30 children's voices, all singing in unintelligible gibberish for 3 consecutive hours. Another incident involved a member of personnel on site, Agent McRoy, who cut a pumpkin vine using a machete. Horrifyingly, the severed vine bled. By that we mean, actual human blood came pouring out of the plant. Another agent, on a separate occasion, was also found dead within the SCP-097 maze. Agent Long had disappeared on the way to the restroom, only to be discovered lifeless and bloodied resting against a pumpkin. During one weekly examination of SCP-097, one Agent Cole broke open a pumpkin completely by accident. As the pumpkin split apart, however, to the agent's horror, a child's skeleton was revealed to be inside. A human child skeleton. A little girl crouched in the fetal position, believed to only have been about 5 years of age. Another incident saw O'Toole, a research assistant working on site at SCP-097, experiencing symptoms of nausea. O'Toole also appeared to be vomiting pumpkin seeds, despite not having eaten any recently. Within a day, O'Toole was dead, seeming to have died overnight in his sleep. An autopsy conducted by Foundation experts revealed that O'Toole's chest cavity, the space beneath his ribs, was somehow filled with the same pumpkin seeds. All of these happenings are strange to say the least, but perhaps most concerning of all is the effect that the abandoned fairground of SCP-097 seems to have on children. Any under or up to the age of 10 years old can fall victim to an unpredictable signal that seems to emanate from SCP-097, with a maximum range that is, as of yet, undetermined. Usually beginning in early April, children that are affected by this signal become afflicted with somnambulism, or sleepwalking, as it is more commonly known. On clear nights, these children will wander around their own homes, often only stopping in front of closed doorways. This behavior usually doesn't happen often, at least at first, only occurring once a week. However, sleepwalking gradually becomes more frequent, and by around the middle of August, it will be a nightly occurrence. If children with this affliction are ever woken up while sleepwalking, they will scream for several seconds before appearing confused. This seems to be the only known way to break the influence of SCP-097. However, if left undisturbed, a child will spend their sleepwalking episodes familiarizing themselves with the doorways of their house. They will stop at every entrance, exit, garage door, gate, even the neighbor's front doors once they find a way outside. From September, the sleepwalking children will stay outside, upright but asleep until the sun comes up. Many are often found laying on the grass in their gardens, and commonly recall having dreams about autumn season activities. Between September 1st and November 1st, any affected child not awoken during their sleepwalking will begin to migrate towards SCP-097's location. All while still unconscious, they will traverse county roads, cutting across large empty fields, as they gradually make their way towards the abandoned remains of the county fairground. Once there, they will even be able to blindly navigate a path through the maze that surrounds most of SCP-097 until they find the center. What happens when they make it to the center of the maze? Any sleepwalking children who are able to make it that far will seek out SCP-097-1, the gigantic pumpkin crushing the truck in the middle of the SCP-097 area. The children will then sit down around the almost 23-foot tall pumpkin and begin to sing. Even though the SCP Foundation have managed to make recordings of this, much of the singing seems to be gibberish, or at least not sung in any known language. However, music will also begin playing from an unknown source, seeming to include a number of basic instruments, most commonly simple drums and pipes. After the sleepwalking children have spent a number of minutes singing like this, that is when things take a turn for the far, far worse. Like a Charlie Brown Halloween special straight out of your most horrific nightmares. From the tangled mess of plants that make up the maze within SCP-097, things will start to emerge. These entities will crawl out of the surrounding flora, or will come bursting out from within the larger of the nearby pumpkins. They appear to be childlike in both their appearance and mannerisms, some even wearing pajamas or similar clothing. Why? Simple. Because these are the children that sleepwalked before. They are all previous victims, the ones stolen from their families and brought into this maze. Still wearing the clothes that they were last seen in, they are all the children known to be lost to SCP-097. What happens next is truly chilling. The latest child that has been affected by the draw of the pumpkin-filled fairground will be quickly surrounded by all their fellow victims. The other children, if they are in fact still human children, will encircle the newest child, singing and dancing around them in a circle. As they do this, a dim light begins to glow from somewhere within SCP-097-1, the biggest pumpkin in the center of SCP-097. Finally, at this point in the process, the newly affected child will wake up. Normally, they experience a great deal of terror and confusion. After all, they have been unconscious throughout this entire ordeal, sleepwalking far away from the safety of their own home to a maze in the middle of nowhere. Terror is a powerful thing, enough to make even the bravest person let out a scream. But the moment the now awakened child lets out any sound, that is when they are doomed. Should they scream, cry, or make any form of vocal noise, then the others will swarm them. The other children, the ones previously lured into SCP-097 while sleepwalking, will attack the terrified newcomer. Each time is different. Sometimes they will claw at the new child. Other times they might bite or kick. The methods are always different. But most often this swarm of the pumpkin's previous victims will strangle or dismember the latest visitor to the abandoned fairground. At this point, there is no saving the latest victim. Any attempt to interfere will only fail. Either the children will all become intangible, or another violent phenomenon will occur within SCP-097, stopping any onlooker from saving the child's life. When the deed is finally done, and the latest victim has been killed by the other children, the gigantic pumpkin at the heart of SCP-097 will open. Its side will split like a pair of great, devouring jaws, and the children will throw the body of the newest child into SCP-097-1. Once the body has been disposed of, these entities, once children that sleepwalked away from their families, will follow, crawling into the pumpkin before it closes and the music finally stops. The exact number of children between the ages of 3 and 10 years of age who have been lost to SCP-097 is currently kept secret by the Foundation, and perhaps for all of our sanities, that is for the best. Like we said, a lot of us have fond memories of Halloween, but not all of us. Jay and Michael were a pair of urban exploration YouTubers looking for their big break. You might remember their video exploring the dead mall on the outskirts of your town, or the supposedly haunted 1950s insane asylum out in the sticks. But you certainly won't find these videos anywhere online. After the incident at SCP-823, all of their content was scrubbed away from even the most comprehensive internet archives. Why, you ask? Because these unfortunate urban explorers decided that their big break would be exploring a certain abandoned theme park, and it would be one of the last decisions they ever made. Michael and Jay had heard rumors about the theme park. Its name was lost to time, as was the date of its opening and closing, and the reason it was even abandoned in the first place. Even some of the most hardcore urban explorers didn't dare to tread there. Something about it, a good friend had once told Jay, just didn't feel right. Sometimes if you dare to venture into the forest near the theme park at night, you can still hear music. The jolly, piping tunes of rides and carnival stands still beckoning, as if to say, we're still here, come and play. Of course, none of this frightened Jay and Michael. They could already smell the sponsorships from headlamp and compact camera companies. No amount of anxiety would stop them from making their doomed trip to the so-called Carnival of Horrors. It's a terrible shame. If they'd listened to the stories of this place about how unnatural and evil it could be, they might still be alive today. Like all the best urban explorers, they arrived at the woods near the abandoned theme park in the dead of night. They ignored the signs warning them about everything from structural instability to dangerous wild animals to asbestos. Nothing would keep them out. Nothing. They reached the abandoned theme park not long after, though it was a mere shell of its former self. During the several decades of abandonment, nature had reclaimed it. The Ferris wheel was covered in overgrown ivy, and the carnival stands were blanketed with mold. As the duo swept through the grounds with their flashlights and cameras, they saw a faded sign that bore the words, Thriller Chiller, the park's most popular roller coaster. They also took their time to marvel at the exceptionally creepy-looking Tunnel of Love, the broken-down House of Mirrors, and a huge grinning statue of the park's former mascot, Happy Hippo. This theme park was something out of a nightmare, which naturally made it potential video gold. But as the excited duo wandered further into the park, they couldn't help but notice the quiet, tinny carnival music. Music that seemed to be drawing them closer. Michael asked Jay if he could hear the strange, impossible music, and felt a chill creep in when he answered that he did. Could all of the stories be true? They were lost in thought, but their legs kept moving. They were getting closer to something now. They could feel a presence. And was that music getting louder? An instant later, though, another sound cut through the silence. Bang, bang. It echoed out through the still night air. Birds flew from their perches in the trees. Jay and Michael both fell to the ground dead, their heads taken off by the .50 caliber rounds of a highly trained Mobile Task Force sniper on the payroll of the SCP Foundation. Their recording equipment, along with their bodies, were taken and destroyed. Any trace of them were scrubbed from the internet. It may seem a little harsh, but a bullet to the head is much kinder fate than what would have awaited these two if they'd kept walking. That's because the Carnival of Horrors is no dark fairy tale. The rumors are all true, and something really is waiting in the dark. That's why this abandoned theme park is known to the SCP Foundation as SCP-823, a Euclid-class anomaly with a violent history. What's even more unnerving is that the researchers studying 823 have repeatedly implored the O5 Council to increase the park's classification to Ketier and allocate more resources for containment, only to be denied. But after you've heard about the horrors that unfolded there and the danger it poses, you'll probably take the researchers' side. The park is divided into two zones, the yellow zone and the red zone. There are to be at least 6 members of Foundation personnel present in the yellow zone at all times to ensure that no civilians wander in. Our 2 urban explorers earn themselves a death sentence not just by wandering into the yellow zone, but passing dangerously close to the red zone. This is the true epicenter of the park's dangerous, anomalous activity. It's a place so hazardous that anyone entering, whether they're a civilian or a member of Foundation staff, is to be executed at a distance by sniper fire without hesitation. Once upon a time, though nobody knows exactly when, there was a theme park that seemed no different to any other. Eager children and thrill-seeking teens arrived by the busload, ready to stuff their faces with cotton candy and corn dogs, and then reverse the process on a vast array of roller coasters. But even then, during these good times, there was something dark lurking behind the cheerful facade. Little by little, everyone, visitors and employees alike, started falling victim to strange and horrific accidents around the park. Of course, when it comes to theme parks, accidents come with the territory, but none like this. Here are just a handful of the horrific and mysterious deaths that occurred while the park was open. So strap in, because just like a roller coaster, this isn't for the faint of heart. A pair of young lovebirds decided they wanted to enjoy the romance of the Tunnel of Love. The two sat in a swan-shaped boat as they were ferried through darkened passageways. Anyone would assume that they were having a great time, but at some point, terrible shrieks of pain and fear began to echo through the ride. Attendants, confused and terrified, stopped the ride and found that the screaming persisted. Just some stupid teens playing a prank, they figured, and started the ride again. But when the swan-shaped boat finally exited the Tunnel of Love, the park employees were greeted to a horrifying sight. The two teens dead, their bodies somehow fused together at multiple points. Another unlucky customer met a gruesome fate inside the House of Mirrors. They entered, but while inside, they were stalked by a mysterious, carnivorous humanoid entity known as Subject 79. The customer was pursued and eventually caught by Subject 79 and brutally dismembered. Some parts of the body were fused to the House of Mirrors interior, while others, like the right arm, were never found. The customer actually survived their ordeal, and whether that's a happy ending is up to you. But it wasn't just the customers at the park who were in danger. A 23-year-old park employee working a summer job collapsed while entertaining children dressed as the park's cheerful mascot, Happy Hippo. It wasn't uncommon for people to get overheated and collapse in the heavy suits on hot days. But one thing was different here. He was screaming, crying, and trying desperately to remove his mask. People rushed to help, but nobody could get the suit off, and he was declared dead soon after. When he was eventually cut out of the suit, coroners found that the employee had choked to death. His mouth, trachea, and lungs were filled with a fibrous substance later determined to be identical to the stuffing of his costume. An intense roller coaster known as the Thriller Chiller was a magnet for horrific accidents, which became more violent and intense over time. The first accident seemed like a typical theme park tragedy. A safety harness failed, dropping a rider 15 feet during an inverted loop. They landed on the track below, breaking their neck and skull, causing instant death. While this was a tragedy, it wasn't exactly anomalous. But the next major accident on the ride was an entirely different story. This time, 15 people met with disaster while riding the Thriller Chiller roller coaster. Starting from the front and moving back one car at a time, each group of riders was decapitated by blunt force trauma. A new pair of decapitations appeared to happen at every turn and loop on the ride. Forensic scientists still have no idea how this could have possibly occurred. Despite all of these disasters, the park was only finally abandoned after a day known as Bloody Sunday, when the anomalous powers of the location reached a 20-year peak. It's believed that 231 people were killed during the carnage of that day, and another 7 were horribly maimed. The SCP Foundation contained the Carnival of Horrors not long after, but the mysterious deaths didn't even end there. Foundation Mobile Task Force Row 71, also known as the Origami Toads, were sent in to assess containment procedures and discover the source of all the anomalous deaths. They were unsuccessful though, and instead they merely added to the list in exceptionally horrifying ways. One agent was found dead, surrounded by empty grenades and bullet casings. It appeared he'd removed the explosive propellant from all of his ballistics and consumed it, dying in the process. Another was found with his jaw broken, having apparently pulled out and inhaled his own teeth. and dying of the resulting internal damage. The commander got the worst fate of all, so horrifying in fact, that we can't tell you the full details. All you need to know is that something was shoved into his brain that really didn't belong there. The Foundation considered having the entire park destroyed with a massive airstrike, courtesy of the Mobile Task Force News 7, aka Hammerdown. However, the O5 Council denied this request, on the basis that the park was too close to populated land. They'd have no plausible cover story for the bombing, and they don't even really know if blowing up the park would prevent anomalous activity from occurring. The Carnival of Horrors is here to stay, folks. The Foundation just hopes to keep it from getting new visitors. So then back to why the researchers want this place upgraded to Ketir. After all, these classifications aren't about how dangerous an anomaly is. They're about how difficult and complicated they are to contain. But here's the problem. According to the researchers, the red zone, where the dangerous anomalous activity is at its peak, isn't bound to one fixed position. It's changed position at least 3 times already, and even worse, it appears to be growing. Not seemingly so Euclid class now, is it? After all, you might not even need to visit the Carnival of Horrors to be in grave danger. If it keeps growing, then someday soon, the Carnival of Horrors may be visiting you.
Roll up, come one and all. The circus is in town, and not just any circus. The greatest show in all the multiverse. Don't pay attention to the fact that the tents weren't here yesterday, or that you don't remember hearing anything about it before now. That's just the circus magic at work. And there's no circus more magical or more mysterious than Herman Fuller's Circus of the Disquieting. It's a show so marvelous that even the SCP Foundation wants to get in on the act. So come watch the show, come feel the magic. After all, what do you have to lose? The story of this humbling traveling show begins in 1893 with the founder Herman S. Fuller. He was born into a wealthy family, and at the age of 21, he was invited by his uncle to Chicago to see the buildings his company had constructed for the World's Fair. He was dazzled by the sights he saw in the Windy City, and from then on he dedicated his life to finding a way to bring that same awe to people across America, and eventually, the world. After receiving a small loan from his uncle, Herman Fuller set about building the miraculous circus you see before you today. He knew he had to get a leg up over his competitors. After all, the 1890s were a golden age for traveling shows in America. So Herman devoted his time to research, trying to find acts and oddities that were truly out of this world. He learned the way between worlds, stole books from the Wanderer's Library, and with them studied alchemy, transmutation, sarcasm, and other supernatural disciplines. That real magic and touch of the macabre would be what made Herman Fuller's Circus of the Disquieting so special, and would ultimately give it its longevity. Herman Fuller's first anomalous acquisition was a genuine Fiji mermaid, like the one that famed showman P.T. Barnum kept on display around the same time period. Unlike Barnum's, however, Fuller's mermaid had been brought to life. The crowds loved it, but like all attractions, pretty soon crowds grew bored of it and hungered for the next strange sight. So Fuller went about acquiring more curiosities. His next important acquisition was the man with the upside-down face, or Manny for short. He serves as second in command to the ringmaster and manages things behind the scenes, including the acquisition of new talent. Many other anomalous beings and items were purchased for the circus by Fuller through the auction company known as Marshall, Carter & Dark, another group that the SCP Foundation makes a habit of keeping tabs on. Another thing that sets this circus apart from any others is the clowns, because they aren't like any you've seen before. Though Herman Fuller's Circus of the Disquieting employs professional clowns, the vast majority of the clown troupe are non-human descendants of an extra-dimensional race of magical shapeshifters. Nobody really knows why they decided to come to our reality and help Herman Fuller set up his circus, but the leading theory is simply that they were bored. These original clowns are the progenitors of the turn clowns and the bread clowns. Turn clowns being humans who underwent a clown transformation procedure, and the bread clowns being artificially grown children produced by the other two types. Earlier in the circus's history, before we knew what we know today about genetics, much more barbaric methods were used to create new clowns. Young human subjects would be subjected to beatings and painful transfigurations at the hands of the circus's child breaker. These days, however, the circus no longer employs a child breaker. Instead, the creation of new clowns is the responsibility of resident clown breeder, Richard C. Normus. And before you say anything, don't laugh. That is his real name. Some of the most famous clowns in the troupe are Eugene and Pius, both of which are original clowns. Mr. Noodles, who is a bred clown, and Icky the troupe leader, who was once a human with magical abilities known as Veronica Mason. She still possesses her anomalous powers as Icky, and her magic act is one of the most beloved parts of our show. After the sudden disappearance of Herman Fuller, Icky inherited his position as ringmaster and has been doing a spectacular job ever since. Not every attempt to create new clowns has been successful as Icky and Mr. Noodles, though. Some of the earlier attempts were quite grotesque to look at. Herman Fuller's troupe of clowns are an enthusiastic, happy-go-lucky, but occasionally violent bunch, capable of minor feats of reality bending that allow them to perform all manner of tricks. They live on a diet of mostly sugar and need to be milked regularly. Clown milk is an invaluable substance here at the circus, as it's the secret ingredient of the famous black cotton candy, which, by the way, is free with admission. It causes the brain to produce high levels of serotonin, meaning that when you eat it, you're primed to have a great time. Be careful though. Raw, concentrated clown milk is not for human consumption. Though the clowns love to drink it, even a small amount can cause a human to go into cardiac arrest due to an overload of happiness. The sound of calliope music also goes a long way to helping people truly get the most out of their visit to Herman Fuller's Circus of the Disquieting. The calliope is self-playing and requires rolls of perforated paper to be loaded into it so that it can play a variety of pre-programmed pieces of music. Each piece produces a different psychological effect on visitors who have consumed their cotton candy. The skater's waltz will make them accept whatever they see at the circus, no matter how weird, as nothing out of the ordinary. Wonderful for making sure nobody blabs about their experience to a certain pesky foundation. Officer of the Year makes them less likely to perceive an event as unlawful. We use that one when we suspect the cops are closing in. Hail, hail, the gang's all here is used to get people to congregate at the big top for showtime. And American Patrol causes those who have eaten their cotton candy to seek out those who haven't, in order to strongly encourage them to have some. What do you mean you lost your dog is one that gets played after hours, when it's time to get the clowns ready for milking. Now that you have an idea of the history and how things work around the circus, it's time for the tour. The circus is made up of a series of tents and trailers, as well as a midway with standard rides and games that you might find at any circus. Outside of the big top, where shows are performed once a day, there's also the Den of Freaks and the Hall of Humans Extraordinaire. The Den of Freaks is home to fantastic acts like Sluggo and Eliza the Living Head. Sluggo is a man whose eyes are on stalks like those of a slug, and he can bend those stalks into any shape he wishes. He can even use them to create the shapes of human faces. Eliza the Living Head is a woman whose head lives independently of her body, which is safely kept in storage. Even without her body, she can speak and sing and often answers questions from the audience. The Hall of Humans Extraordinaire is home to performers who lack physical anomalies, but otherwise display otherworldly talents like the amazing Zoltan, a fortune teller and alchemist who Fuller picked up at a place called the Utterly Bizarre. The Hall of Humans Extraordinaire also used to be home to Icky the Clown, back when she was still Veronica the Magician. The recent lineup has changed quite a bit thanks mainly to the activities of the circus's constant enemy. You guessed it, the SCP Foundation. Or as they are better known to the stable of interdimensional clowns as the Miss SCP Foundation. The Foundation does not appear to be a fan of circus folk, and many of the former acts are now in their containment. For example, Madame Rezarta and her amazing palm reader, also known as SCP-1884-A and SCP-1884-B. Madame Rezerta was a blind Albanian woman in her 60s who was born without hands. She shared a psychic link with a creature named Luana, who was a large shapeless entity made up of 932 hands. 929 of these hands appear to be those of an old woman and share Madame Rezarta's DNA, but the remaining 3 hands seem to be from a male Caucasian adolescent, an adult Hispanic female, and a Bengal tiger. Through her psychic link, Luana acted as Madame Rezerta's eyes, feeling its surroundings to provide her with a mental map. Fuller attempted to buy the 2 of them when they were 8 years old, but when their parents refused, he sent Manny to whisk them away under the cover of darkness. Madame Rezerta's act involved sending Luana to feel the faces of audience members, and then trying to describe their appearance based on what Luana felt. The act was a hit, but Madame Rezarta claimed to have been horribly abused during her time with Herman Fuller. The 2 of them escaped while on tour and were picked up by old SCP while trying to rent a hotel room in the UAE. Then there's Virtuoso, also known as SCP-1860. Virtuoso was once a book of sheet music that was transfigured by Herman Fuller into one of the circus's original acts. It's a tall, thin humanoid being encased in a densely woven paper-based material that stretches like nylon or spandex. It constantly drips black ink which it has a telekinetic control over. It uses the ink to create the shapes of musical notes, which float around it while it sings. Virtuoso can sing in multiple voices at once across different vocal ranges, and constantly performs arias and show tunes for whoever is listening. It was recovered from underneath a burnt-down shack at a fairground where the circus had been set up earlier. In containment, Virtuoso still sings, but translations from Italian reveal that the lyrics of the arias it's singing have been changed to reflect its own situation. Some of these translated lyrics include, "One day I'll tell you of my creation and life within the circus, born from the ringmaster, his breed." Another act the circus dearly misses is Motormouth, also known as SCP-2094. He was one of the rare human clowns born in New York City in the late 70s. From birth, he displayed a supernatural level of flexibility in his lower jaw, and as he grew older, he discovered that he could swallow large objects and store them in a kind of pocket dimension until he needed them again. Unlike Madame Rezarta, he went with Manny willingly, as even at 8 years old, he knew that his alcoholic mother didn't care if he lived or died. Motormouth took to the circus like a fish to water, and grew from a shy child into a very talented, talkative, and highly charismatic adult. He was a juggler first and foremost, who would catch pins, balls, and knives in his mouth as part of his routine. But the name Motormouth came later in his career when he let a stunt driver drive a car off a ramp and down his throat. However, as great an act he was, a conflict arose between him and Manny over Manny's questionable methods of sourcing new acts. Manny found out that Motormouth had been helping some of the anomalous kids that Manny brought in to get back to their families. And as punishment for his insubordination, he was locked in a box and left behind at the end of a Japanese tour. The box was marked for Essie, because Manny thought being put in containment was the best punishment he could think of. With how strange and unusual its acts are, and how it always seems to pop in and out of new locations at strange and unpredictable times, you might wonder if the circus has any sinister motives. Well, the truth is, though sometimes the acts can be a little gruesome, their methods of acquiring new talent are a little unorthodox, and the clowns a little out of control. Their only goal is to entertain. In that respect, they're no better or worse than any other circus. So we hope you've enjoyed your visit. Make sure to stick around for the show, and don't forget to take your complimentary serving of cotton candy. Because there's nothing quite like a day at the circus, especially one like Herman Fuller.
The Gofford Theater is silent, save for the occasional shifting of your fellow Foundation researcher. The 2 of you are alone, and you've been tasked with transcribing the performance of SCP-6373. You read the file, understood the briefing, and you even told yourself that you're prepared to witness whatever obscene show is about to commence. but you've never experienced SCP-6373 firsthand. This is your first time, filling in for another researcher who got herself injured during one of the performances. You hope it wasn't anything serious. The lights flash, pointing to the main stage. The smell of rot is almost overwhelming now. You swear you see a family of rats scurry under your front row seats. The curtains fly open, revealing nothing. You expect someone to come out from behind the curtain, but the stage is barren. Suddenly, a loud creaking noise is heard from above, and 4 broken, poorly painted, and utterly deranged-looking puppets drop from the ceiling. Their strings are slightly visible, and their movements fluctuate between quick, jerky motions and slow, weighty ones. The one with the long nose starts talking in a high-pitched, lofty voice, asking the desolate audience if they're ready for the show. You start to wonder when things are going to kick in and really cement this anomaly's status as a terrifying SCP object. For the first 5 minutes, the show isn't too bad. The puppets sing and dance a bit creepy, but they're not doing anything wrong. At least, that's what you think, until the long-nosed one brandishes a baseball bat and savagely smashes the smaller round one to a pulp, splattering guts and insides all over the theater. And it only gets worse from there. Welcome to the Gofford Theater, the home of SCP-6373, codenamed by those researching it as Stage Blight. SCP-6373 refers to a collection of 4 papier-mâché puppets, each standing around 1 meter in height and complete with attached strings. These puppets constantly emit a rotting, disgusting stench, though the Foundation has come to the conclusion that this smell is entirely non-anomalous. SCP-6373 gain their anomalous properties at around 6 p.m. each day, as long as they're positioned inside the Gofford Theater, a building located in the city of Reading, Pennsylvania, which is where the Foundation has chosen to contain the 4 objects. If SCP-6373 aren't inside the Gofford Theater, they instead start decomposing, rotting and breaking down into a stinky, smelly mess of puppet materials. So what happens when SCP-6373 takes on their anomalous properties? The puppets gain sentience, mobility, and limited intelligence, though attempts to communicate with SCP-6373 outside of their performances have failed. Sorry, no puppet interview logs for today. They then proceed to the main stage of the Gofford Theater and put on a puppet show. Wow, a whole performance. Isn't that sweet? Not really. SCP-6373's performances are notoriously brutal, unpredictable, and terrifying. So much so that the Foundation has offered counseling services to the poor personnel forced to watch them. That's right, there must be at least one observing personnel in the Gofford Theater to witness SCP-6373's performance, or else the puppets drop to the floor and start decomposing again. Following their performance, the puppets lose all sentience until 6 p.m. on the next day, where the process repeats. But let's talk about SCP-6373 themselves. These puppets have a lot of character. You have Pierre, SCP-6373-1, the main character of the performances, who just loves to verbally and physically abuse his fellow wooden companions. Gluton, SCP-6373-2, is a large disembodied head with a gaping mouth, who speaks only in single-word statements and deep, guttural moans. SCP-6373-3 is a tiny gray round ball known as Emi, who remains entirely silent throughout the performances, despite being the puppet abused by the others the most frequently. The puppet SCP-6373-4, Jacques, is a long-necked clown who serves as the group's comedic relief. But before we delve into the horrific performances put on by these entities, let's talk about the Gofford Theater. The theater was opened in 1860 by French immigrant Timothée Gofford for the purposes of putting on stage plays, musical performances, and in-house puppet shows that feature SCP-6373. The puppets were designed by Gofford himself and were massively profitable and popular with Reading's children. While it's not known if SCP-6373 possessed their anomalous properties during the original run of performances, the Foundation doesn't believe they did, and they were otherwise ordinary puppets controlled by puppeteers. Unfortunately, the Gofford Theater was not built to last. In 1884, it closed its doors after a legal battle between Gofford and his wife. Cynthia raged through the courts. Cynthia was accused of stealing money from the theater, to which she defended herself, saying that Timothy was not only unfaithful in their marriage, but also physically and verbally abusive to her. The lawsuit ended in a divorce and an ominously worded letter written to Cynthia by Timothy.
I write to you in poor health, and all joy sapped from my life. May misfortune follow you until the end of your days. I will not construct again that which I had spent 2 decades of my life working towards. I can only thank God's grace that the building has remained vacant, as I could not bear to see it owned by another man. I want to perform again and see the children smile. My happiness was so linked to theirs.
A week later, Timothy Gofford disappeared entirely. 4 months later, Cynthia Gofford supposedly died of natural causes. In 1887, Foundation precursor organization the American Secure Containment Initiative, or ASCI for short, discovered SCP-6373 inside the theater and documented its anomalous properties shortly after. SCP-6373 had a captive audience, and containment persisted long after the ASCI had assimilated into the SCP Foundation. And now we can get to the part you've all been waiting for, the performances themselves. The Foundation has kept a log of all of SCP-6373's performances, but here are some of the most notable ones. SCP-6373's first performance in 1887 involved lighting fixtures around the theater collectively powering on several minutes before the show, as well as a slight piano accompaniment originating from an unknown source. The contents of the show were simple. Pierre rescued a princess, a costume Jacques, from a dragon played by Gluten. Researchers noted several moments where one of the puppets had difficulty maintaining posture and moving, often taking multiple attempts to lift limbs. These moments increased in frequency over time. In 1895, the puppets performed a show about a bank robbery gone wrong. Pierre decided that Aimé was the one who alerted the police about their crime and spent the rest of the performance berating and abusing the small puppet, specifically for betraying its trust and breaking the bond they had shared after years of working together, as Pierre put it. The puppets use Aimé as a soccer ball, but their game quickly devolves into a contest of trying to see who can kick it the hardest. Aimé is noted to be silently crying throughout all of this. In 1916, the puppets put on a World War I period piece, taking place on a farm owned by husband Pierre and his wife Aimé. Pierre, upset that his crops were destroyed by the ongoing war, asks Aimé for support, but the puppet remains silent, even as Pierre's cries grow louder and more frantic. Pierre then shifts the blame of the crop's destruction from the war to Aimé itself. He states that Aimé will never be let out of the house again. Sounds of war and human suffering were heard throughout. In 1922, the puppets repeated their first performance about the princess and the castle. Except this time, the puppets sounded a lot angrier in their dialogue delivery, and their movements are described as frantic bursts in between moments where they do nothing but hang limp. Pierre yells at Gluten for an apparently poor performance as the princess, and when the puppet pretends to play dead, Pierre specifically states that that's not what being dead feels like. In 1938, the puppets attempted to perform a comedy routine, but quickly found out that their slow, unsynchronized movements were causing problems with the pacing and effectiveness of their act. Pierre became frustrated and brandished a prop fire hose, which he sprayed at the fellow puppets, causing them to scream as their paint ran off and chipped. Their screams heard throughout the theater were notably feminine. In 1952, Pierre performed a piano duet with Jacques, who was unable to sit still or keep quiet during the act. The annoyed Pierre proceeded to savagely slam Jacques' head into the piano until it was dented, and his jaw was detached completely. The Jacques puppet began leaking a disgusting yellow fluid from its mouth. Pierre fetched Aimé and forced the tiny puppet to sit in the fluid, all while Jacques writhed in pain. While the damage sustained by the puppets during each performance was healed and restored by the next day through anomalous means, Jacques' jaw was never fixed, and he continued to seep fluid for the duration of the anomaly's containment. 1958's performance was only 2 minutes in length, and featured Pierre attempting to teach an art class. Gluten's canvas displayed the words, "Open inside," which for some reason angered Pierre enough to end the performance entirely and lead the puppets off stage. For the next 24 hours, an unidentified male voice screamed and swore from behind the stage's curtain, throwing objects and punching walls. The source was not discerned, and no SCP-6373 instances could be found within the theater until the next day at 6 p.m., when they re-emerged from the back and performed as usual. This 1963 performance was particularly bizarre. Pierre took the stage by himself and proceeded to deliver a eulogy for Timothy Goffard in the voice of an unidentified woman. Strangely, the Foundation discovered that a funeral service was not held for Goffard. In 1971, the puppets' performances became a lot more lifeless. Their voices became monotone, and their movements were slower. Oftentimes, a puppet would have to hit itself in order to restore fluid motion to its limbs. This would continue in all future performances. In 1973, SCP-6373 performed a sitcom skit, in which Pierre and his 2 sons, played by Jacques and Gluten, took turns beating and breaking Aimé. This trend of physical abuse towards Aimé would increase in frequency as time went on, like in this 4-hour 1976 performance that consisted of the silhouette of the puppets from behind the stage, torturing the poor thing, all while Aimé silently took it. All the while, Pierre told Aimé that it was the sole reason the puppets were in their current situation, and why they were unable to move forward. In 1979, the Goffard's Theater's structural integrity was observed to be failing. Masses of rats, termites, and fungi were discovered throughout the building. Similarly, the performances themselves became even more disturbing. One involved the puppets reenacting the life story of Timothy Goffard, but refused to acknowledge or mention his wife, Cynthia. Instead, they claimed he died alone and miserable, without ever experiencing love. The performance ended with Pierre smashing its head against the floor and knocking it off, unleashing a swarm of blowfly larvae the Foundation was unable to remove from the theater. In 1983, the puppets performed a skit in which they held a funeral for Aimé. After exploring a variety of possible afterlives from various religions, the puppets were understandably confused about which one was correct and how they could achieve salvation. Then Jacques has an epiphany, exclaiming,
I know the answer! We're all dead! This is the only afterlife there is!
The puppets then went limp and stayed there for a week. By 1984, the puppets put almost zero effort into their performances. One involved them openly fantasizing about injuring the audience members, and ended with the puppets picking a poor Foundation researcher from the audience as a volunteer and snapping her arm, all while laughing. Another had the puppets stating the full names, birthdays, and death dates of every patron of the Goffard Theater, from its opening to the present, and this included the Foundation researchers watching. SCP-6373's movements were awkward and slow, their speech slurred. It was clear that the puppets were on their last limb. In 1985, every performance had degenerated to a frenzy of self-harm carried out by the puppet, devoid of any stage lighting and accompanied by a noisy, barely harmonious musical accompaniment. Feminine screams and male laughter is heard throughout. But things got even worse throughout the year, as performances further degraded to periods of sitting or standing still and incoherent rambling while facing the audience. The performances were entirely indecipherable, and all dialogue consisted of grunting, moaning, screaming, and weeping. On June 6, 1985, SCP-6373 put on another performance. The puppets stood side by side for 18 minutes before bowing and falling to the ground. No lights or music was heard. Following this performance, the puppets began to decay, shedding their papier-mâché exteriors. When this was complete, the insides of the puppets were revealed to be composed of human remains and organs. Pierre contained a brain, Jacques a heart, Gluton a mass of skin and tissue, and Aimé was empty. All of this material had been cut cleanly and sourced from a single individual. When the Foundation unrolled the skin tissue contained inside the gluten puppet, there was no doubt about which individual it resembled. Cynthia Cordier, the wife of Timothy Gofford. The object was reclassified as neutralized, and no further performances or anomalous activity relating to SCP-6373 was ever observed. The nightlife in Italy is famous worldwide. When the sun goes down, its cities come alive with locals and tourists alike, looking to party, have fun, and sometimes even get a little rowdy. But in an unknown town in Italy, there is a nightclub that offers a very different experience. For those who wander in, they might find themselves playing a role in a drama far more exciting and dangerous than the night out they expected. To the outside viewer, SCP-453 is nothing out of the ordinary. Just a standard nightclub filled with partygoers and revelers evening after evening. As typical as it may seem, the unassuming nature of the venue is nothing short of intentional by design. It is actually a front, owned and operated by Foundation personnel who carefully monitor everyone who comes in and out, keeping a watchful eye for any indication of drama or danger. Violence can and will erupt at any moment, and no matter what, no night at the club is ever routine. But the visitors' chaotic actions are not their own. Though the people's decision to attend the club is of their own free will, after some time settling into the environment, something changes. Over the course of the night, people begin to do things that may otherwise seem out of character for them. In fact, they are playing roles. Though the same roles are played each evening, they are played by different people night after night. Some of these dramas are harmless, but some are violent, and some may even be world-threatening. If the partygoers survive their role in their scripts, they will then leave the club and return home, with only a faint memory of the events they took part in that evening. The next night the process renews and the events will repeat, but not all scripts repeat at the same frequency. Some are regular, while others are only triggered by special circumstances. Only select people take part in these scripts, while the others around them go about their night until triggered to take on a role. And these bizarre performances may have been going on for a very long time. The building now known as SCP-453 may have existed in some form or another even before the Foundation existed, with investigations of the site indicating that it was once a villa of a powerful Roman senator who held extensive parties every night. These pervasive affairs, the odd happenings that occurred during them, may have left a lasting imprint, because no matter what is built on the site, it seems as though people are attracted to the building to party. The Foundation has had possession of the site for a long time, and in a previous attempt to neutralize its chaotic power, they even went as far as demolishing it completely to the ground, but that still proved ineffective. Even when there was no villa or nightclub present, large groups of revelers would still gather. The gatherings would turn into street parties, the street parties into riots. Many times these circumstances were cause for even worse consequences than the regular series of events. The Foundation didn't know how to stop the scripted nightclub, but they could maybe control it. If the people wanted a nightclub, the Foundation would give them one. The site was rebuilt from scratch, and from the outside looking in had all the characteristics of your standard everyday disco watering hole. But really, it was meticulously constructed to be a sophisticated SCP facility, capable of handling whatever anomalous activity was thrown at it. Built from the same materials used in all other SCP containment sites, and always staffed with containment personnel on high alert, ready to handle the more violent and dangerous scripts that may play out at any moment. But control over the scripted nightclub may be more easily said than done. The nightclub has been in operation for a long time, and over the years the staff has noticed some extremely odd events taking place. For instance, certain things aren't always where they're supposed to be. Aspects of the club are built and then slowly shifted to new locations within the site over time. Most notable, the weapons locker on site for staff to suppress violent incidents has slowly been drifting towards the men's restroom and away from the secured section for staff only. And it's not the only part of the building slowly shuffling its way about. Could SCP-453 be learning to foil the Foundation? And if so, Why? While many of the scripts that play out in the nightclub are harmless, some are of more concern. The Foundation has been studying what triggers different scripts, and while some seem to inevitably play out and pull people in, others are triggered by the presence of different guests. The Silver Harlequins will only play out if more than 15 guests are over the age of 60, but there are a few distinct characteristics of the scripts. All begin at approximately 9 p.m. at night, and while people continue behaving in modern ways, there is one key difference. All scripted dialogue takes place entirely in Latin. The Foundation believes that these scripts may be playing out events that happened in the initial incarnations of the club back in Roman times. While the players differ, the events always remain the same, and while the scripts rotate, SCP-453 seems to gravitate towards 3 scripts, all posing unique challenges for the Foundation, and one posing a potential end-of-the-world scenario. First up, Script 43, the Cheating Wife. This is normally the most common script and poses a relatively small threat to those not actively engaged in the script or outside the nightclub. The main priority is to have the staff's medical team on site and ready to intervene when things get bloody. It begins at 9:49 p.m. when a young woman heads to the men's bathroom. She will be followed by 3 men. The events of the bathroom are expunged, but a little over an hour later, a 4th male will enter the picture. It's the husband of the woman, and he's not happy. He will enter the nightclub, order a bottle of red wine, and head to the bathroom. There, he will brutally assault the 3 men, knocking all 3 unconscious and causing minor brain trauma to the 3rd. He will then drag his wife out of the restroom, cursing her and accusing her of infidelity as he takes her out of the nightclub. The script then terminates, and all participants no longer remember the events beyond a bar fight. Medical attention is recommended for the 3 men and the woman, especially the most severely injured of the men. But after the script concludes, strange events continue to happen. While none of the participants know each other before the script begins and don't maintain memory of the exact events, they display strange behavior. The man playing the husband becomes violent when questioned and develops an obsession with the woman playing his wife. The Foundation believes it wise to keep these 2 individuals separated. Oddly, SCP-453 seems to prefer men who are shorter and less physically strong than the other men to play the husband. Attempts to short-circuit the script have proved unsuccessful, only delaying it. An attempt to remove the weapon, a wine bottle, has led to the husband using more dangerous weapons like a bar stool instead, which can lead to fatalities. It seems that SCP-453 gets what it wants, and what it wants is for the show to go on. Then there is Script 21, the Senator's Visit. This is considered a higher priority script, and the Foundation knows to be on high alert for medical intervention to prevent fatalities. This one kicks off at 10:13 p.m. as a civilian steps into the club and takes the role of the Senator, the original owner of the villa. He is accompanied by an entourage of 13 servants, each carrying improvised weapons. And when they step in, the club stops dead in anticipation of the coming events, because 2 people in the club just became assassins. The Senator and his servants take over a table, and the Senator begins ordering extravagant food and drinks. He'll always gravitate towards the most expensive items available from the current stock, and his orders are always completed at specific times, no matter how the Foundation tries to intervene. During his meal, a civilian selected to be an activist will approach the Senator and begin criticizing the treatment of the citizens in a nearby city, only to be assaulted brutally by 3 members of the entourage. The Foundation will take her away for medical treatment after she's left for dead. If you think that's brutal, be prepared, because the Senator's night is about to get a whole lot more dangerous. The first of 2 assassins will then approach the Senator, pull a blade, and attack him. The assassin will be intercepted by 4 servants who will kill him, despite the best efforts of Foundation personnel to prevent the outcome. But it's the second assassin who is of far greater concern. He will incite a brawl among civilians around the eastern wall of the club, then use the chaos to attack 7 of the servants as he approaches the Senator. Those servants are of priority for medical intervention, but the chaos makes it impossible to intercept them until 10 minutes after midnight. The assassin will then engage with the remaining servants, barely surviving, and eventually stab the senator in the neck fatally. The Foundation has been unable to prevent this, and the danger isn't over yet. The fight at the nightclub will continue to escalate, causing more injuries but no more fatalities, until over an hour has passed and 19 civilians take on the role of Roman guards. They'll pacify the crowd and clear the club. This is when the Foundation can finally intervene and treat the wounded. Much like the first smaller-scale script, any attempts to interrupt the flow of the events taking place will be unsuccessful and often result in more deaths. None of the large number of participants remember the events, only believing they were in a brutal bar fight. This is one of the most common scripts, and the Foundation's only priority is to try to minimize casualties with quick medical intervention. But one script hints at a much darker event at the club, and that's Script 82, the Plurality Cult. Most scripts begin before midnight and plunge the club into chaos. But if no script has started before then and the club seems mundane, the Foundation knows to get ready. They'll suit up in riot gear designed to withstand neurotoxins and claim to the guests that this is part of a theme night. At roughly 2 hours after midnight, the events will begin with one civilian standing in the center of the room saying, "The time of plurality has come." At least half of the other civilians will then join in saying, "We embrace the many." But there is something different about this script. Sometimes Foundation staff members will join in. This is the most dangerous script at SCP-453, and staff knows to immediately terminate any Foundation member who has been converted, because Intervention 453-82 Pariah is about to begin, and there is no room for error. First, any civilians who did not become engaged in the cult should be immediately evacuated to a safe holding area if possible. The priority then turns to subduing the cultists by any means necessary. The security team should attempt to restrain them and keep them alive, but lethal force may be necessary. The cultists have a priority of their own though. They will not respond to any attacks by the security team, and will instead begin a Latin chant that ends with their leader laughing hysterically and offering a toast to the club. The club will seemingly return to normal, but the danger is just beginning. Before 2:25 a.m., all the cultists and all civilians must be removed from the premises, by any means necessary. If other attempts have failed, the Foundation will release Type 14 neurotoxic gas into the club to eliminate anyone on site, with one exception. The cult leader is not to be harmed under any circumstances. If the cult leader is harmed in any way or the staff has not subdued the cult by 2:30 a.m., the Foundation will trigger a self-destruct mechanism that will eliminate the threat, for now. The site's unique properties cannot be stopped, but the script can be stopped in its tracks. The clock cannot be allowed to reach 3 a.m. under any circumstances. More worrisome, this script is becoming more and more frequent. The cycle continues, but the Foundation is focused on containment. The club is to be staffed at all times by bartenders, bouncers, cleaners, and emergency and medical staff, as well as at least 10 security staff members and 2 observation personnel. All are responsible for studying and memorizing the scripts, and being prepared to handle any scripted events that occur. The site is to be inspected and measured regularly for any changes, and to make sure all its security measures are in working order. The site will be locked every day between 4 a.m. and 8 p.m. to prepare for the night ahead. Because at 8 p.m. on the dot, SCP-453 opens for business, seeking new players for its drama of the night. Not every sentient anomaly the SCP Foundation contains is a monstrosity hell-bent on destroying the world, or a dangerous apex predator with a taste for D-class. In fact, most aren't. Most sentient anomalies are perfectly docile, even polite. They range from helpful talking animals to self-aware AI to former Foundation personnel themselves. There's little need for these low-security anomalies to be treated with the same paranoid caution reserved for anomalies like SCP-939 and SCP-049. And for some of them, the Foundation can even help them out a little bit. One of these anomalies is SCP-4149. At cursory glance, SCP-4149 seems to be some sort of standard anomalous location, not at all uncommon for the Foundation to deal with.
Just stick a lock on it and call it a day, right? But the containment procedures tell a different story. MTF personnel are ordered to act like they are visitors of an art gallery when inside SCP-4149. Not just that, but any character breaks have to be played off like live theater. What kind of strange anomaly requires hardened agents and researchers to act like performance artists? Let's go back to when the Foundation first discovered SCP-4149. It was 2007 in Chicago, and Foundation agents across the city were stalking out art galleries, painting exhibitions, museums, and other fine art repositories. It wasn't some wild goose chase to finding a painting-based anomaly like SCP-1155 or SCP-3864, but instead a concerted operation to root out anomalies and people associated with the notorious group of interest, Are We Cool Yet? Don't let Are We Cool Yet's name fool you. The Foundation has a long and storied history with this group of subversive, nonconformist artists that sprang up after World War II. They've changed over the years in political attitudes and direction, but one thing remains consistent. They make anomalous art. And not just anomalous art, dangerously anomalous art. Paintings that drive people to madness, sculptures that kill viewers, sound familiar? And installations that result in dozens of casualties. These anomalous art terrorists are extremely dangerous, and no one knows them better than the Foundation. Chicago, being known for its art, is one of their favorite haunts. So when the Foundation launched a stakeout operation tracking known Are We Cool Yet members, they knew they'd find something eventually. That happened in June, when two Foundation agents tailing a group of Are We Cool Yet members saw them moving a number of paintings out of a truck and into what seemed to be a regular condominium. The agents, excited to finally get a lead, jumped out of the car and quietly followed after them, right into the door of the building. They rushed in with their guns to find nothing. But on the second floor, things were more interesting. One of the Are We Cool Yet members was laying on the ground, writhing in pain and covering his face. Upon being poked by one of the agents, he lowered his hands, revealing a gory sight. The man's face was warped like a Picasso painting. His nose was on his forehead, his mouth was slanted all the way to the left of his face, and his eyes were on his tongue. He cries that the gallery did this to him, and that his friend ran in. The agents turn into the bedroom. Instead of a wall and a window, a large hallway leading into a space that doesn't exist outside the building is present. SCP-4149. The last thing the agents see before calling for backup, another Are We Cool Yet member shaking hands with what appears to be a gigantic sloth in a three-piece suit. By the time the MTF arrived with special anti-cognito hazard gear, they were all ready to enter SCP-4149. The four-man team enters, rounding a corner into what appears to be a makeshift art gallery filled with anthropomorphic animals, lizards in loungewear, birds in fancy dresses, and the large sloth in a suit the agents had seen. Along the walls are paintings and artworks blurred by the agent's special eyewear. It doesn't take long before the team are noticed by the animals, SCP-4149 instances who start criticizing their acting, in English to the MTF's surprise. The heavily armed men start hearing complaints and incompetent social commentary about their lack of subtlety from a growing crowd of clothed giant animals. Confused, they are eventually rescued by the sloth, who plays off their strange arrival as a performance piece gone awry and dismisses the crowd to other art pieces. After very slowly dragging them into a corner, the besuited sloth politely introduces himself as Professor Zorkanov, the owner of this art gallery. He claims to be a man of culture, an enjoyer of fine art, who found he could only truly operate his gallery how he wanted, free of the bounds of any one world. In fact, the entirety of SCP-4149 exists in its own pocket dimension. Upon being asked, he explained that the Are We Cool Yet member was trying to sell him some work, but it wasn't refined enough for the professor's tastes. But the artist seemed to have run off to another planet to train, specifically one lacking in atmosphere. The professor agrees to be designated as SCP-4149-2 and undergo interviewing to help the Foundation understand what the situation surrounding his gallery is, which is where the Foundation finds most of their information for the anomaly's description. SCP-4149 is what's known as an extra-dimensional space, a location that doesn't quite exist in any one reality, but by itself in a pocket dimension. It's accessible through a hallway in the apartment building which the Foundation has bought and slated for demolition. Inside SCP-4149, one can access a large warehouse serving as a gallery, containing upwards of 70 different art pieces, ranging from fancy oil paintings to contemporary sculptures and modern art. Almost all of them are cognitohazardous in one way or another, extremely dangerous to the untrained human mind. The gallery itself seems to be populated by a wide variety of entities, not just the finely dressed animals that caught the MTF off guard. They claim to come from all the various neighboring universes and realities that SCP-4149 borders, and seem to be fine looking at all of the art pieces. And of course, the proprietor of the establishment, SCP-4149-2, Professor Zorkanov, 2 meters tall, dressed in a nice waistcoat and tweed jacket. Foundation agents all describe him as friendly and polite to a fault, even if he is a giant sloth. Unfortunately, that means everything he says or does is at a snail's pace, or more accurately, a sloth's pace. But he usually spends his time plodding between the various art pieces and explaining or discussing them with the guests as curator of the gallery. Where the professor gets the artworks isn't quite clear, nor is how. He says he can travel through universes and worlds to some degree, but this is unconfirmed. For now, all the Foundation knows is that sometimes the works in SCP-4149 just suddenly seem to cycle out with new attractions. The gallery isn't a perfect socializing space, though. The entry that exists in the apartment building is a design flaw, a construction error, but not one that can be easily fixed without tearing the entire place down and starting again. Something the professor has sounded very upset at when someone deciphered his glacial yelling. SCP-4149 is friendly to Foundation interests, though. The professor doesn't want uninvited guests to know about his gallery any more than the Foundation does. To that end, he's cut a deal. So long as SCP-4149 submits to background interviews and SCP-4149 is carefully kept under containment, SCP-4149-2 will be permitted to keep operating his gallery, and the Foundation will protect it against hostile intruders. What intruders, you ask? Well, you'll have to look to the interviews for that. The main interview is conducted by a D-class through an earpiece. The giant sloth's statement have to be sped up multiple times to be understandable on the recording. It starts off simple. Zorkanov is the best human approximation to the professor's real name. Him coming from another world, presumably one inhabited by other sloths. His name wasn't designed to be spoken by simple humans. But he explains, the universe that SCP-4149 exists in is a shell, a universe that has undergone heat death and become completely empty before being compacted into just enough space to build SCP-4149. The professor, having some ability to pop from universe to universe, decided to make this place his home and host to his love of art and expression. He seems reluctant to talk about his original home, though, until directly asked by the D-class. Then he explains. He was a man in well standing in his home universe, on a world inhabited by creatures similar to himself. He enjoyed all the fruits of society, culture, music, social occurrences, and yes, art. Unfortunately, the rest of his society didn't share his views on art. They considered it not only a waste of time, but an insult, an offensive level of arrogance. Being a highly technological society, they thought art and humanities were inappropriate expressions of emotion. But from the professor's point of view, all this had done was create a deeply unhappy, deeply uneducated society. His private art collection, in his manner, was a closely guarded secret, but eventually the secret got out. His name was spat out as a cultural extremist, a subversive nonconformist who was giving dangerous ideas to the next generation. A mob formed and did what mobs do best. They chased him from his home at night and burned his collection. Barely escaping with his life and the few pieces of art he could grab, the professor swore to rebuild his collection for the joy of all. As the interview continues, the D-class reveals he is blind. That's how he avoided being driven insane by any of the many cognitohazardous art pieces. The professor hasn't heard of blindness before, but sympathizes. Eventually, things settle into a familiar rhythm. Professor Zorkanov continues to operate his gallery for the pleasure of all of his visitors, and the Foundation need only station one armed guard in the apartment, instead of spending time, money, and effort forcing everyone into inconvenient containment in the middle of a crowded city. But just a few short months later, the Foundation receives a call from the agent on duty requesting backup. Once again, the MTF arrived on scene, kitted out for cognito hazards. They enter into SCP-4149 heavily armed and armored. This time, they find something much more surprising and dangerous than an art exhibition. The guests are lurking around the edges of the walls, but the professor is in the middle of the floor, arguing extremely slowly with two more giant sloths. They're dressed in tactical combat gear and holding what look to be guns. Their yelling sped up is made clear. The newcomers are berating the professor for expressing his art and for running from something called the Xenarthra Council. When they finally notice the presence of the MTF, they scoff and gradually raise their weapons, telling the MTF to leave while they still have the chance. But while one of them is busy yelling at the sloths to drop their weapons, another one of the troops simply walks over and pulls the guns out of the clawed paws of the sloths. Come on, they're sloths, man. By the time they slowly realize their weapons are no longer in their hands, the sloths panic at the thought of these strange, furless creatures moving so many times faster than they ever thought possible. Just before they're handcuffed, the pair disappear in a burst of green light, and at this, all the guests burst into applause. This conflict, this emotion, this humor, this is the performance they were waiting for the whole time.
There's no shortage of graffiti in most downtowns. From simple tags to intricate murals, it can be found in almost any alley, underpass, and subway tunnel. To most people who live and work there, it all blends into the background. But one piece of street art isn't so easy to ignore, since unlike most graffiti, this one is animated. John Freeman, an unassuming man in his mid-20s, was out late one night in April of 2004. It was a Saturday, so he'd let loose a little more than he originally intended, and he was starting to feel the effects, so he went out back for some fresh air. This wasn't the most popular bar in the city, so when he opened up the door and stepped out, he found himself completely alone. Despite that fact, he couldn't shake the sense that he was being watched. He looked around, squinting and trying his best to focus his eyes. Just then, John thought he spotted someone behind the dumpster, so he decided to investigate. When he looked behind the dumpster, there was no one to be found. Instead, painted on the wall was a piece of street art. It was a strange piece of art too. A half-human, half-owl creature, rendered in highly realistic detail. The figure was crouched over, and its eyes faced outwards. Eyes that looked far too real, like they were staring at him right out of the wall, following him as he swayed from side to side. There was something so wrong about it. Its intense gaze, its sharp beak, its grasping claws. How could anyone paint something like this? It looked like it could crawl right out of the bricks. Something about the painting made him nervous, but he couldn't look away. It was drawing him in, beckoning him. There was something about it that John just couldn't resist. He stepped closer until he was close enough to reach out and touch it. What John didn't know was that he was also close enough for it to reach out and touch him. Before he could react, he saw the painting come to life. The feathers ruffle, the hands prepare to grab, the beak opens up. For John, it was already too late. From inside the bar, the other patrons heard a loud scream from the alley. The bartender ran outside to see what was going on, but when he got there, all he found was a blood stain on the concrete. There was no sign of John Freeman, and there was no graffiti on the wall. This is just one of the dozens of recorded attacks attributed to what the SCP Foundation has designated SCP-1155, or the Predatory street art. It can appear on any wall in any major metropolitan area, but it prefers ones that are out of the way and isolated, such as back alleys, lonely parking structures, subway tunnels, and underpasses. The creature depicted in the street art has the long, sinewy arms of a human, with the head and feathery body of a large owl. And though its pose changes often, it's always facing out, watching. The Foundation is no stranger to deadly works of art. such as the infamous SCP-173, the living sculpture who will snap your neck if you stop looking at it, or SCP-1074, the abstract art capable of psychologically enthralling the viewer and leading them into a state of catatonia if exposed for too long. However, what sets SCP-1155 apart from these other two is the fact that it's incredibly hard to contain and its methods are particularly violent and gruesome. But more on that later. If you spot this odd painting while you're out walking with friends, you probably wouldn't give it a second thought. But if you're alone, it's a different story. This SCP has an almost hypnotic effect when viewed by a lone person. If you spot it, you'd be overwhelmed by curiosity, and you'll feel compelled to get a closer look. You can potentially resist this hypnotic effect with some effort, especially if you're aware of its anomalous properties, meaning knowledge really is power when it comes to SCP-1155. Once you get within 2 meters of SCP-1155 though, the creature will jump out of the wall and strike, with attacks usually following the same pattern. First, the victim will be restrained to prevent struggle or escape. The eyes and tongue will then be removed, followed by the amputation of the hands and feet. The victim will then be disemboweled and the intestines and stomach removed, all in as little as 6 seconds. But not all of these attacks result in death. Some have actually managed to survive attacks by the predatory street art, with those lucky few being eligible for Class A amnestic therapy, courtesy of the Foundation. In most cases though, there's no survivors to find and often not even a body at all. Once SCP-1155 has begun its attack, and if it remains unspotted, it will snatch up its prey and vanish before appearing on the wall somewhere else. The Foundation has made attempts to discover where the bodies end up by equipping D-Class test subjects with GPS trackers, but the results of these tests have been inconclusive. Recorded relocation events have covered distances as small as 15 meters or as far as 800 kilometers. But the true range of this creature's movement is unknown. If caught in the act of feeding though, SCP-1155 will disappear, leaving its victim behind. Usually in these cases, the victim will bleed out and die, but some have survived. 2 such survivors were D-Class personnel who were used for tests to see what happened when the attacks were interrupted. Both were incoherent and badly wounded following the attacks. Their eyes were gone, and one of them also had his tongue, hands, and feet removed. Though neither could adequately communicate what had happened to them, the one who still had a tongue claimed to still be able to see in spite of his missing eyes, and that he was still looking through his stolen eyes. He described what he could see, a kind of grisly pantry, where it appeared SCP-1155 had stashed the remains of its previous victims, perhaps to feed on later. This D-Class managed to escape from on-site quarters during an unrelated containment breach, running back to where he had been attacked by SCP-1155. He was pursued by law enforcement, who had been told by the SCP Foundation that he was an escaped mental patient suffering from serious delusions. The police chased him for several blocks before he disappeared down an alleyway. Officers at the scene reported hearing a scream, but when they got to where it came from, there was no sign of the D-Class. Just a dead-end alley with a blank wall. The other D-Class, the one with no tongue, was successfully relocated to an undisclosed location. While the patient was being moved though, Foundation surveillance noted an increased level of movement from SCP-1155. The painting was appearing and disappearing, and in each relocation, its posture suggested hunting and tracking behavior, as if it was pursuing the one who got away. The places it was manifesting also became more and more public. At one point, it appeared on the side of a building right in the middle of town, though it was too high up to be reached by any of the hundreds of witnesses. While all of this was happening, the D-Class being held for medical treatment was becoming increasingly distressed. The Foundation theorized that the entity may have been frustrated at losing its prey, and that it would likely continue to relocate in and out of highly visible areas until the D-Class was returned to it. Because of this, the executive decision was made to take the D-Class to the outskirts of the city. SCP-1155 manifested in the area, and the team left both it and the D-Class unobserved. Both the creature and the D-Class soon disappeared, and SCP-1155 resumed its more manageable hunting behavior. Due to this SCP's ability to jump from place to place, it has proven difficult, if not impossible, to contain, and has a well-earned Keter class designation as a result. At first, the Foundation tried physically removing the wall on which the SCP had manifested, but this only caused it to relocate. A similar result happened following attempts to paint over or damage the painting. Current containment procedures involve closely monitoring the disused shopping mall lot where SCP-1155 currently seems to live, for lack of a better term. The mall has been marked as condemned, and Foundation agents continually monitor the area, posing as security guards to dissuade any civilian traffic from entering the danger zone. Mobile Task Force Pi 1, nicknamed the City Slickers, tried to obscure any surface on which the creature appeared, but this didn't end well. First, the team leader ordered that a vending machine be placed in front of the graffiti while it was located in an alley that transients were known to frequent. This was supposed to be only a temporary stopgap, intended to stop any unsuspecting person from falling under SCP-1155's hypnotic spell. In time, a proper containment zone would be established, with more agents forming a security perimeter around the area. But by the time the extra resources arrived and the vending machine was moved, the painting had disappeared. It had responded to the obstruction by relocating and reappearing on a wall at a nearby children's playground. The Foundation quickly mobilized, interrupting SCP-1155 in the middle of an attack in order to trigger another relocation. But sadly, several lives were already lost by the time they arrived. The entire ordeal was a tragic and costly mistake on the Foundation's part. It seems that when SCP-1155 is obstructed, it gets angry. Instances where it relocated after being obstructed more often than not resulted in it moving to a much more public place that would be harder to contain for the Foundation. While it previously appeared in low-traffic areas, it now seemed emboldened following containment attempts and was readily appearing in public spaces. It was argued that all of humanity would be better off allowing a few people to be taken by SCP-1155 every couple of years than risk it ending up in a heavily populated area where it could endanger who knows how many people before it was noticed. The Foundation continued to research possible containment procedures though, and eventually figured out the perfect minimum distance at which they could create a barrier so that it wouldn't be noticed by the SCP itself. This was one of their more expensive containment protocols, as it required purchasing an entire mall, only to shut it down and condemn it under the pretense of there being a dangerous sinkhole underneath it. The expense seems to have been worth it though, as SCP-1155 is currently still inside the parking structure connected to the mall. The mall and the parking structure are under round-the-clock surveillance via motion capture security cameras, and while there have been no other relocations, there's no telling what might trigger one again. So if you live in a big city and you find yourself walking alone at night, keep an eye on the street art. If you spot a painting of half-human, half-owl that you could swear wasn't there before, resist the urge to check it out and just cross the street instead. Does life imitate art, or does art imitate life? It's a question that has been asked throughout human history. This philosophical debate is about the ways art either reflects the world around us or influences it. But in the case of SCP-085, the idea of art imitating life takes on a far more literal meaning. This entity was created during an experiment involving two separate SCPs. The first of these was SCP-067, which is a fountain pen that, when held by a user, will take full control of the person's hand and arm. SCP-067 then either writes about or draws something linked to the user holding it. The second of these SCPs was SCP-914, better known as the Clockworks. This massive piece of anomalous machinery will have various effects depending on what or who is placed inside of it, and which of its several settings is chosen on the selection panel. After test subject 1101F was given the anomalous fountain pen, the result on the page was a simple female figure, around 6 inches tall and 1.5 inches wide. She was drawn wearing a summer dress with her long hair tied back in a ponytail, and a single word was written underneath her: Cassandra.
As part of the experiment, the drawing was placed inside of SCP-914, and the find setting selected. This is the setting that is known to improve the object placed inside of it in some way. For example, a hunk of steel placed inside will be transformed into a pile of steel carpet tacks, a refined version of the steel. When the drawing was placed inside, something truly amazing happened. Cassandra came to life, or as she now prefers to be called, Cassy. SCP-085, sometimes known as hand-drawn Cassy, is a completely sentient being. She is fully able to communicate, however it all has to be done non-verbally. Her voice cannot be heard by anyone beyond the page where she was drawn, but she is able to utilize sign language or create writings on the page in order to communicate with Foundation researchers. SCP-085 has been shown to also be capable of understanding text that is written on the same paper she exists on. She is fully animated, aware of her own existence and the limitations of being two-dimensional in nature. According to profiling conducted by the SCP Foundation, she has her own distinct personality. Cassy is good-natured and agreeable, displaying a natural drive and motivation, but also seems to feel the burden of loneliness, living in solitude on the page. It should be noted that any and all attempts to recreate the same experiment that formed SCP-085 had failed to create the same or similar results. Tragically, Cassy might be the only one of her kind in existence, a creation of pure luck with no chance of making another. No wonder she feels so lonely. While Cassy is limited to her two-dimensional form and has so far been unable to enter our three-dimensional world, she has demonstrated several different abilities on the page. Firstly, she is not solely confined to the same paper she was drawn on. SCP-085 is able to transfer herself from sheet to sheet. If another page is placed flush with hers, she will be able to simply step across onto this new page. However, there is a limit to what kind of page Cassy is able to transfer herself onto. She could easily take a stroll through the pages of today's newspaper, but can't just wander onto someone's family photos or anything made of cardboard, glass, or parchment for that matter. SCP-085 can only exist on paper or canvas, and only when they are directly connected to her original page. According to Foundation testing, this is not exclusive to blank pieces of paper either. If Cassy ever transfers herself onto a page bearing a repeated pattern, like a piece of wallpaper, then she will appear to be in the foreground while everything else on the paper appears to be behind her. SCP-085 will perceive each page she enters as a completely new place. From her point of view, patterned pages seem to be like endless space. Additionally, Cassy can also travel to other pieces of artwork and adopt the same art style of each new environment she appears in. For example, transferring herself onto the pages of a comic book will cause Cassy to be rendered in an artistic manner matching that of her surroundings. The same occurs if she travels to an oil painting, watercolor, or charcoal sketch. Interestingly, when appearing in comic book form, Cassy's thoughts and speech are visible through thought bubbles that are commonly used to display text within the comic medium. Her size and the angle she is viewed from also changes to match the different panels of the comic page she is on. At one point, SCP-085 was introduced by Foundation personnel to a print copy of Ascending and Descending by the famous Dutch artist M.C. Escher. This painting is of a large building, with its roof consisting of a looped, never-ending staircase. When she transferred onto the print of Escher's painting, SCP-085 curiously explored her new environment and was able to ascend and descend the staircase. The researcher gave Cassy the name of the piece and asked for her thoughts on it. She remarked, "It's pretty, I guess. Would make a neat exercise track." When the researcher asked if she noticed anything inconsistent about the staircase, Cassy replied, "No, as far as I can tell, it just loops around, down, up all the time. Why don't more staircases do that? It's pretty neat." Following this, Cassy directly requested more impossible objects or optical illusions to be drawn onto her page and made part of her environment. Unfortunately, her request is still pending review from the O5 Council. Being able to step from page to page, transferring herself onto canvas or sheets of paper is but one of SCP-085's unique abilities. She can also interact with other drawn objects on the same page she is on. If someone draws an item of clothing on her page, or a vehicle, even food or drink, then Cassy would be able to wear, use, or consume those. Objects drawn for her behave as if they were real, but only when Cassy is directly interacting with them. The rest of the time, they remain still, just as they were drawn. Once SCP-085 touches them, these items will animate. This same rule even applies to anything drawn to depict something in motion, for example, trees being blown in the wind or the waves of an ocean. These will also stay perfectly still when drawn, and only move when acted upon by SCP-085. However, much like her ability to transfer from page to page, Cassy's power over other two-dimensional drawings has limits. Drawing anything that would normally be an inanimate object within the real world will provide SCP-085 something that she can directly interact with, but this doesn't appear to be the case for living beings, like another person or an animal that would have its own autonomy and freedom of movement in our three-dimensional reality. Animals and people drawn for Cassy to interact with will remain as static, unmoving drawings, and will not become animated like she is, even if drawn using SCP-067. She cannot impart any of her own sentience or free will onto these drawings, and they remain still even when she touches them. You might think that drawings of other people, whether they are animated or not, might help alleviate Cassy's solitude, but if anything, it just reminds her how alone she is. SCP Foundation researchers have noted that SCP-085 is very friendly towards them and any subjects brought in to conduct experiments with her. Visits from the three-dimensional world outside the page she inhabits seems to offer some relief to Cassy's loneliness. Through much of her behavior, she has shown a fascination with our reality, and in particular she has an interest in cars, expressing that she wishes she had an ability to work on them. This desire appears to be completely genuine too, as shown when her photo was taken with SCP-978, the camera that reveals its subject's inner desires, and in Cassy's case, showed her in a fully realized 3D version of herself working on a car. SCP-085's curiosity about the world beyond the page is most likely due to how different it is from her everyday two-dimensional existence. But on at least one occasion, Cassy's curiosity got the better of her and unintentionally led to a containment breach. From the moment she was first drawn to life, and even after her initial testing with researchers, SCP-085 seemed unaware that she was a two-dimensional being in a three-dimensional world. Foundation security protocols regarding SCP-085 meant that no one on the research team assigned to Cassy was permitted to tell her the truth about her 2D nature. The truth about her existence was kept from her with the best of intentions, as research staff did not want to cause SCP-085 any undue distress or trigger a possible psychological snap. Anything that Cassy raised as an inconsistency or discrepancy within her world on the page was explained by researchers to be the result of her imagination or dreams, and research personnel attempted to convince SCP-085 that she was in a scenario wherein she was the only human survivor, searching for others in a post-apocalyptic environment. However misguided this decision to conceal the truth might have been, it was at least done with Cassy's best interests at heart. But a lie, as they say, is harder to maintain than the truth, and keeping SCP-085 in the dark about her true nature arguably led her to more hardship that may have been avoided if she had been allowed to know the truth. In the incident in question, a Foundation researcher entered the room where the drawing pad that Cassy resides in was found, and they were carrying a paper copy of SCP-085's Special Containment Procedures report. Given that she had already partaken in tests where she had transferred herself to other paper and canvas surfaces, Cassy assumed that this file was yet another new environment for her to explore. The researcher allowed SCP-085 to make direct contact with the report, and she was able to transfer over to the document before the researcher realized their mistake. Whether this occurred accidentally or if this researcher intended to confront Cassy with the truth about what she was, is unknown. Nevertheless, Cassy found herself on the pages of her own SCP Foundation file. The record of every test the research staff had conducted, a full description of how she had first been drawn by SCP-067 and brought to life by SCP-914, all clear as day, in black and white. Cassy's own true nature was presented to her. Immediately, the yarns that Foundation researchers had spun about her surviving an apocalypse began to unravel. It was all a lie, meant to keep her in the dark and prevent her from ever knowing that she was trapped in 2 dimensions. She returned to her original page shortly later, but the damage was already done. Due to her having breached containment and briefly escaped into her own file, a number of Foundation researchers proposed that SCP-085 be destroyed. There was always a risk of this happening again. What would happen if Cassy unwittingly found herself inside another file, with access to more of the Foundation's sensitive information? However, the O5 Council decreed that SCP-085 was not to be terminated, allowing Cassy to continue to exist despite the breach. Ever since she learned the truth about herself, signs of depression have begun to manifest in her behavior. Finding out you are a drawing trapped in 2 dimensions with no chance of ever having someone else for company would be enough to crush anyone's spirit. But luckily, researchers have since managed to uplift Cassy a little and offer her a welcome distraction from her unfortunate revelation. The optical illusions like the never-ending staircase she requested were quickly drawn into her environment. Additionally, given the interest she had shown in the technical drawing of a 1964 Ford Mustang convertible, SCP-085 had been allowed to assemble a car of her own. By transferring each individual component of the car from the blueprint to her page, hand-drawn Cassy had been gradually building her very own Mustang to keep herself preoccupied from her life in cartoon motion. And in the end, if she can distract herself and find that tiny bit of happiness, isn't that all that matters? In a sense, we're all trapped within our own dimension. Cassy in her 2D one, us in our 3D world, filling our lives with hobbies and entertainment, all in an effort to make sure that we never tug too hard at the threads of our reality, and find out there just might be much more out there that we're missing. Now check out SCP-999 the Tickle Monster, and SCP-5094 Miss J's Whiz Kids Schoolhouse for more surprisingly wholesome anomalies from the SCP Foundation.